Great. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us all this evening for another Restless event with our partners, My Menopause Centre. And today we are looking at how to get your libido back in menopause. So before I hand over to Helen, who'll chair this evening's event, I just want to remind you that you can post your questions and thoughts in the chat function throughout the whole event. And also there'll be time for questions at the very end. So the event will run for 1 hour and we are recording it. So we will mail it to everyone who signed up this evening. So I'll hand over now to Helen, who is co-founder of My Menopause Centre.
Hi, Aideen. It's lovely to see everybody this evening, and thank you so much for joining us. We recently have started these events by asking everybody to put into the chat where they're joining us from, because it's lovely to see where in the country, where in Europe, where in the world all of our participants are coming from, and it's lovely to know that this community of women we often find from around the world that are coming together to discuss these important topics. This is our first event since the summer holiday, so I hope that you've all had a lovely summer and welcome back to the autumn. Yes, we've got Hampshire, wow, South Africa, Cornwall, so we are stretching the hemispheres. So look at you, Yolanda, in South Africa. I'm guessing the weather, you're heading into summer now, aren't you? Spring and summer. So we're heading into autumn here. Ooh, Barcelona, very nice. Scotland, Nottingham, all over the UK, Europe, Cotswolds, Zurich, excellent. It's so cool. It's amazing. We're having this very connected conversation, as I said, with women from around the world. Well, look, thank you so much for joining us. As Aideen has already said, we're here to talk about libido and the menopause. And at My Menopause Centre, if you've joined our events before, you'll know that we believe that the very best way to smash a taboo is to talk about it. And of all of the taboos around menopause, sex is probably one of the biggest ones. Now, there are lots of studies that have shown that anywhere from 40 to 50% of women going through the menopause experience a loss of sex drive, and around 1 in 3 experience vaginal dryness or pain related to menopause. But I know from talking to Dr. Tonye, who's here tonight, and I'll introduce in a moment, that she and Dr. Claire, our founder, believe that this is really underestimated, as many women are very sadly too embarrassed to talk about these symptoms, and even with their doctor. And it's really important that we normalize this conversation because there are so many solutions out there to help you. So I'm really delighted to be joined this evening by 2 brilliant women and experts in their respective areas. My Menopause Centre's Dr. Tonye Wokoma and Eleanor Gardner, the founder of Pelvic Relief. Now, Dr. Tonye is an experienced consultant in sexual and reproductive health and community gynaecology, and she's been a BMS, British Menopause Society, recognised menopause specialist for well over 10 years. She was admitted as a fellow of the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynaecologists in September 2016, and she also holds the Faculty of Sexual and Reproductive Health Advanced Menopause Certificate and is an FSRH Menopause Guardian involved in the curriculum, logbook and training in menopause care. She's a true advocate of women's health and the menopause, and Dr. Tonye regularly facilitates and delivers sessions on contraception and menopause, and she's authored publications and delivered presentations regionally and nationally. So it's brilliant to have Tonye here today. Now, Eleanor is also a familiar face to the My Menopause Centre community. She has a master's degree in physiotherapy, and she's worked in medical devices since 2007. She founded Pelvic Relief in 2013, bringing together and manufacturing a range of products and supplements for pelvic health to manage conditions such as painful sex, incontinence, and pelvic pain. Eleanor has previously worked for the Yes Company, manufacturers of organic lubricants and vaginal moisturizers, and she regularly attends medical conferences, including the British Menopause Society, the British Society of Sexual Medicine. Now, Eleanor is totally expert in her field, and she is going to share with us some devices and gadgets and lubrication that can really help, and she'll have some things to show us, and we've got some images as well. Now, before we start, a quick reminder of a few housekeeping points. So please put your questions into the chat. We really welcome them. If we don't cover them as we go through, we aim to cover as many as we can at the end of the webinar. And also please remember though, Because we don't have your detailed medical history, we won't be able to provide personal medical advice within the session, but can, of course, answer your questions in a more general way. Final point, also remember that you should always talk to your medical professional before acting on any information provided. So with that, Dr. Tonye and Eleanor, let's launch in. Now, as we said, there are two parts to our conversation this evening. In the first part, we're going to talk about the common gynecological symptoms experienced during the menopause that can affect a woman's ability to have or enjoy sex and ways to manage them. It's hard to even contemplate having sex if it causes pain. So really important to get that addressed. But then we look at specifically why we experience a lot of loss of sex drive at this stage of life. And we'll hear from you about your advice and tips on how to revive your libido. So Dr. Tonye, we'll start with you. So I mentioned that research conducted by the British Menopause Society shows that so many women experience vaginal dryness, and menopausal painful sex is something that people are searching for so much in Google. So share a little bit with us about your experience as a clinician. How often do you see this, and what are patients saying to you when they come and see you?
It's very common, Helen. It's a common symptom of the menopause. It's part of the genitourinary syndrome of the menopause, as you know. So it's the vaginal dryness, the vaginal irritation, the bladder problems, the leaking, the overactivity of the bladder. All these things form part of the same condition. And of course, this can then make sex very, very uncomfortable. And it's happening because of, as estrogen falls, as people go into the perimenopause and the menopause, it can make, particularly in the vagina, make the skin in the vagina thinner, it can make it drier, make it much less elastic. And this is why people start to get some of these symptoms and experience possibly painful sex. But back to your question, it is really common. As you said in the introduction, possibly more than 1 in 3 women, and sometimes women don't volunteer the fact that they're experiencing vaginal dryness or a loss of libido. But we do ask everyone in our clinics if that might be the case, because we know that it's a very common symptom of the menopause.
And what would you say to somebody who's maybe joined us this evening who finds the thought of speaking even to their doctor a bit daunting? What advice would you give them, Tonye, on to help them to open up to speak to a healthcare professional like yourself?
That's a really good question, because I think this is a really important part of our lives. And it makes it worse if we feel we're not able to speak to people. So if, for example, you're too embarrassed to maybe speak to the doctor at the practice, there might be a nurse that you'd be able to speak to, or some other clinician that you can explain what symptoms it is that you're getting. But I just encourage everyone to be really quite open and upfront about it, because it is a huge part of our lives. And the thing is, as you know, there can be treatments for vaginal dryness that are very safe and very effective. But we see women who've gone for many years and they've suffered in silence. I'd really encourage people to go to somebody in their practice and speak to them so they can get the right treatment.
Yeah, and I did wonder if, if your GP is a male doctor and you're not comfortable speaking to a man about this, maybe seek out a female doctor or, a female nurse in the practice where you might, if that helps you feel more comfortable to have the conversation.
I mean, we tend to say this about menopause in general. If you're not comfortable or you feel that you're not being heard, then please ask to see somebody where you might be comfortable. That's completely acceptable. You can do that. Seek a second opinion for how you're feeling.
And so really good advice, Tonye. And do you see any cultural differences in terms of how comfortable or not women are in speaking about sex, speaking about vaginal dryness or pain or painful sex?
I think perhaps people may not go to their healthcare professional from certain cultures, certain backgrounds. But what I find is that sometimes if you provide safe spaces for women, So you and I often go out and do these discussions in places where it might be a female-only space or a safe space, and people will open up. People will talk about it. It doesn't matter which culture they come from. Once one person says, "Oh, this is happening to me," often you find that other people will say, "Yes, oh, that's happened," and that in a way is also reassuring because sometimes you can feel very alone if it's something that you think you can't speak to anyone about. So it's important to create those safe spaces, because you're right that perhaps people from certain cultures will not access help as much as perhaps a white Caucasian woman would.
Yeah, so I think it's that point, isn't it, of, backing yourself and
Yes.
finding somebody, finding the confidence in yourself to have the conversation and to open up. Because as Dr. Clare always says to me, as doctors, you must see this, there's nothing that you haven't seen or heard in a practice, and you won't be embarrassed about it. So don't have any shame. There is no stigma around this. We're here to help each other. And I wonder sometimes, because I know it's been really different by generation, and I know certainly my mother's generation never spoke about anything like this. If sometimes women can feel that this is just how it's always been, and this is how it always will be. And so it's challenging that, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's getting that point across that there is help out there. One doesn't need to suffer in silence. If again, back to what you were saying about certain ethnicities, it may be that it's normalized, it may be that it's accepted. This is part of aging. This is what you have to put up with. Perhaps, sex goes out of the window as you go into the menopause. It's all those myths, and that's why it's really important to have this conversation about what can we do to help ourselves really as we go into this time of life, especially as changes start to happen with our bodies, particularly with vaginal dryness and uncomfortable sex. We've said there's lots of things that we can do to help with that. And
Yeah.
so, please go and see someone.
Yeah, and we're going to come to all of the solutions in just a moment. But before we do you find, and do we know, what do we see from the data in terms of the incidence of vaginal dryness, irritation, painful sex? Is it equal throughout the perimenopause and into postmenopause, or does it increase with age?
I think what I see in practice is that if it isn't treated, it can get worse. And it gets, so people sometimes get hot flushes and sweats, which might improve as people go through the perimenopause and the menopause. But with the vaginal dryness, specifically the bladder symptoms, if we don't get on top of it, it can get worse, and it doesn't need to, I think is the point we're trying to make. So there are simple treatments that are very effective out there that people can try to be able to help some of the symptoms that they're experiencing. So yes, it sometimes they don't notice it, but sometimes it can progress, should we say, and
Yeah,
get worse.
and look, and that's really important, because we know that, if it's a vaginal dryness and irritation, or if it's a leaky bladder, if it causes other sorts of bladder irritation as well, that can impact quality of life. It can end up with you maybe not walking as much, not going out as much, not exercising. So it's almost the ripple effect, isn't it? The knock-on effect.
It takes over people's lives, Helen. That's what we hear in clinic. Completely, people are dictated by what's happening with their bladders. Sex is possibly out of the window. It's all these things that we need to speak about so that people have the confidence to seek help for it.
Yeah. So hopefully with that, we've really landed the point of, one, what causes this in the menopause. Again, the decline in estrogen, the prevalence of this, the impact of it if it's left untreated. But now the really good news is there are lots of solutions there that are very effective in managing this. So Tonye, can you share with us the range of solutions that are available, and help us to understand how women can go about accessing them?
So there is the vaginal estrogens, and there's a whole range. In the past, we had perhaps two different types of preparations, but there are lots of different preparations that people can use, and that targets the vagina and the pelvic floor specifically. So even in women who are on hormone replacement therapy already, a certain number of them will need to use vaginal estrogens as well, because the HRT patch, gel, whatever, perhaps isn't sufficient. And I explain to people that what that does is that it helps increase blood flow to the area. It helps plump up the skin so it's not as dry, it's not as irritable, it's not as thin, and hopefully reduce the discomforts that can happen with smears, with sex, and cause them to avoid these things. But there's other things. If people don't want to or can't have any, most people can have a vaginal estrogen, but there's vaginal moisturizers, and Eleanor will, I'm sure, tell us more about that. There's lubricants and different lubricants that can be used with sex. And if particularly there is a low libido, which is a lack of sexual desire, we know, and we'll talk about that later as well, that sometimes testosterone can be helpful in addition to hormone replacement therapy, HRT. So there's vaginal preparations and there's other things as well that we
Yeah.
can use. Mustn't forget pelvic floor exercises. Sorry,
Yes,
Eleanor.
I was going to say, yeah, and I think we'll pick that up with Eleanor as well. But I think, and we're definitely going to come back to testosterone in the second part. But I think one of the really important points that you've just made, Tonye, is that you can take vaginal estrogens as well as HRT, because that's a question that we get a lot. Because a lot of women wonder, maybe you can help us understand, if you're already taking HRT, so estrogen and progesterone, if you have a womb, why might you still need to take a vaginal estrogen? Why doesn't that type of HRT
and for some
help
people
with?
it's sufficient, but I mean, what I find is perhaps maybe 25% of women on HRT will need some extra vaginal estrogen targeting the pelvic floor, targeting the vagina, and it makes a huge difference for a lot of people. So I do encourage it because it can, especially with the bladder, even if they're not experiencing any significant vaginal dryness, I do suggest that vaginal estrogens, in addition to HRT, may be useful. And it's just because it's targeting that specific area, really, and targeting the tissues in
Yeah,
the pelvic floor.
yeah, and can really help with a leaky bladder
Yeah.
as well. Sometimes all these symptoms are, they don't come solo, do they? They come in little packages, gifts for us. We've got a great question here from Rose. So speaking about the UK, Rose would like to know, are vaginal estrogens available over the counter as well here?
It is, yes. There is, I think this was last year, maybe, I can't remember, but last year, yeah, it became available over the counter. So that's the pessary. But there's creams, there's gels that one can use, there's other fatty pellets that people. So it's again finding out what it is that suits you. And you can get that through your doctor quite easily.
Yeah, so all of this, it's important to say, all of this is available on the NHS, on prescription on the NHS. And the vaginal estrogen is called Gina. And I think it costs about £30 for a pack of 28. And they come in their own little individual applicators. And you can get them, from Boots online or from pharmacies. They'll check that you are suitable to receive them. But definitely worth chatting to your GP about, Tonye, I think is really what we're saying, is the takeaway message from this. And as you say, different types. So I've just posted a couple of links into the chat. One is we've got a great free article on our website, and it also covers vaginal estrogen. So there's lots of great, more detailed information in there. And from our symptom checker about loss of sex drive, which talks about the different treatment options. But Tonye, I'm sure we'll have more questions for you in a moment. But if we move on to Eleanor now, Eleanor, again, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Now, Tonye has already teed up that there are certain lubrications that can help with vaginal dryness and irritation. So, and as we know, not all products are equal, and some products look great, but they actually have lots of nasties in there, which are not good for our vaginal health. And you're an expert in this area, so we'd love to hear from you about your advice and recommendations on what women should look out for.
Yeah. So thank you for having me again. It's lovely to be here. And I think just following on from what Tonye said, I think when we're thinking about these genitourinary syndrome and menopause, we're thinking about this whole system. So we're talking about the bladder, we're talking about the vagina, and we're thinking about the pelvic floor, which is this basket of muscles that sit in the pelvis all the way from the tailbone at the back right through to the pubic bone at the front. And we're talking about the external tissues, so the vulva, and the internal tissues, the vagina. And this whole system is highly estrogenized. And when I first started looking, we were first looking at products like lubricants and things. And pharma had really let down women, as per usual, and had just made products that were slippy and cheap. But actually, these tissues are mucosal, so they're very delicate. And there's a really important microbiome, a vaginal microbiome, that is, when it's healthy, there are really healthy lactobacilli that are producing acids which keep the area free from pathogens, opportunistic bacteria that cause things like UTIs and thrush and BV. So thinking about what we put on and in our bodies and in our vagina is really important. And so moisturizers and lubricants are something that you can use to support, getting estrogen, re-estrogenizing that system is really important. And then we've got moisturizers and lubricants. Moisturizers, in their simplest form, are just delivering water back to the tissues to rehydrate the tissues for day-to-day comfort. They can be used alongside a vaginal estrogen. So if you're using the pessary and you want to use it on the days in between. It's really important that these products are pH matched to the vagina. This is to support those good bacteria that I'm talking about. And it's really important that we don't have highly concentrated products, because that will end up drawing moisture out of the tissues and dehydrating them further. So we want products that have got as fewer large molecules in as possible. I've worked with the Yes company, and I always recommend their products. They're designed to be really skin safe, irritant free. So they have a lovely moisturizer, a vaginal moisturizer that can be used internally and externally. Then there are also lubricants. Lubricants are designed to make sex more comfortable. So they are designed to increase lubrication so that you can avoid those micro tears that come from friction and dryness. So whenever you're considering any sexual activity, or if you're going for smear tests, or if you're using dilators or other products that we're talking about, I cannot recommend enough introducing a good lubricant to avoid the friction that will then lead to pain. So the Yes company have got a lovely water-based lubricant, again, pH matched to the vagina, osmotically matched. It is very natural feeling lubricant. And then I often recommend oil-based lubricants as well. I have got, the Yes company have got a coconut-based one that comes in applicators, and we also recommend now the olive and bee oil-based lubricant. That's just organic medical grade olive oil and beeswax. So it's a really long-lasting lubricant. And it's really nice with the oil-based lubricants. They're very protective of the tissues. People often find that they're the least likely to cause any irritation, because they don't even have any preservatives, because there's no water in an oil-based lubricant. So you can use an oil-based lubricant on yourself, on the vulval tissue internally, and then you could put the water-based lubricant on your partner, and then the two will glide over each other. So you have this lovely sort of slippy effect of the water and the oil gliding over each other. So yeah, that a lot of information, I know, but really it's about knowing that there are some really good vaginal moisturizers just for day-to-day comfort. They can be used daily, they can be used alongside estrogen, and then lubricants to introduce for any sexual activity or any anything involving, you know, when you're, whether it's self-play or whether you're going for a smear test or whether you're doing some work with dilators, then introducing a lubricant, I think, is a really important idea.
Fantastic. And Eleanor, I wonder if maybe when you have a moment, if you could pop maybe a link to your website in the chat to those products, so it's easy for people to find them. And I'll add, you wrote a brilliant article for us about this as well, and I'll pop that in the chat, because I'm conscious of there's always a lot of information that comes through when we speak, and people can obviously catch up on the video, but the articles can be very helpful as well. Now, I'm not sure if you've come across this product, Eleanor, but another Helen in our audience has asked about if your thoughts, or Tonye, if you've come across this on the Dr. Wolf's VSAN product.
I have, and you know, I always try and say to ladies with these products, if you can look at the ingredients list, if they're in, you know, that they should be really open. If there's nothing there that is concerning, and you can get lots of information now about the products that you want to avoid, and it'll be on the BMS website. And then try them. Different products do suit different women, so it is sometimes a little bit about trial and error. But if you find they're really comfortable, you're feeling much more hydrated, you're feeling comfortable, then you know that's brilliant. So it is always, there's always a little bit of trial and error, and everyone is slightly different. But I don't know the exact ingredients list on that product in particular, but there are some really good resources now. I'm sure Menopause Centre or the British Menopause Society, and they do list out the ingredients. We don't want to see petrochemicals. We don't want to see sort of hormone derivative or, you know, equivalents. We don't want to see highly concentrated products. So we don't want to really see glycerol or glycerine. So there are some things that we know we can just try and avoid, but an open ingredients list, and then trying it. And if it suits you, then fab, keep going.
Excellent, thank you. Now, a couple of things. You mentioned the vaginal microbiome, which is really important. And a few months ago, we did a brilliant webinar with one of our other doctors, Dr. Anna Greaves, and a colleague of Eleanor's, who's a consultant gynecologist, specializes in oncology, who's doing a lot of research and work on the vaginal microbiome, and I added a link to that as well. It was absolutely fascinating, and just how different our vaginal microbiome is to our gut microbiome, and how we need to look after them and manage them. And again, Eleanor, maybe you can put some information in about some of the tests and products that you've been working with Joe, the consultant gynecologist on. And again, as ever in women's health, the health gap is really big, and we're just starting to see some interesting work and investment come into women's health in these areas as well, which hopefully was going to benefit all of us. Now, I know on a previous webinar, the topic of smear tests came up, and we had a woman on the webinar who, unfortunately, she said she hadn't done a smear test in about 10 years because it hurt so much. Now, it's really, really important that we have our smear tests done regularly, and when we're called for them. So, Eleanor and Tonye, if we have somebody on tonight, or somebody who's catching up on this evening's event, who's in that boat, what advice could you give them? What can they do so that it's comfortable for them to have a smear test?
Well, I tell people that if they're scared or they're uncomfortable, they need to speak to somebody about it, because that will make the procedure much more uncomfortable. So telling the practitioner that, look, I'm a bit nervous about this, is somewhere to start. If a woman is particularly dry, sometimes going away and using a course of vaginal estrogens may be helpful to help with inserting the speculum and doing the smear. But I think if using the right lubricants during the procedure, talking to people. That's what we would do in our clinics, to be able to make women comfortable, to be able to, because it's yeah, it is a simple procedure, but let's be honest, it's not the most pleasant. It's not something we all say, oh yes, I'm looking forward to that today. So it is about trying to make it as comfortable as possible, and people can help themselves by saying, look, I'm very uncomfortable about this, because we can use different sized speculums as well. We can go at the pace of the person, as slowly as the person would want, talk them through the procedure if needed. But sometimes it may be that, yes, it is completely, really, really difficult to do. And in those instances, we sometimes ask them to be seen at the hospital. But it's important, as you've said, and most women will be able to have a smear test easily, but just try and make it more comfortable for themselves. It's a shame when people have avoided smears for a long time. And often that's telling, because what else are they avoiding as well?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Eleanor.
Yeah, there are a few things that we like that we talk about with things like dilator and preparation before. Is now a good time to maybe bring those in, Helen? So
can you see that now?
So yeah, perfect. So there are products called dilators, which we have some lovely soft silicone ones on the website. Now, these are graded cones, essentially, that move up through a size. And what they're designed to do, they're really useful in terms of providing a slight stretch to maintain that sort of elasticity in the tissue, especially as we lose some of that sort of the flexibility of the tissues. But another thing that's really important when we think about the pelvic floor and we think about these changes, so the pelvic floor are these basket of muscles that sit at the base of the pelvis. And when there are these changes that we're talking about, so the tissues are getting fragile, and there's pain as a result of these changes. When then anything is painful, it causes these muscles sometimes to go into a really protective spasm. And what we want to do is to make sure that those, whether you're putting in a speculum or whether it's sex or whether it's, that those things aren't painful. Now, part of that is about restoring that elasticity and that moisture to the tissues. But then we've got to retrain the body a bit to say, don't panic, it's not going to be painful, and allow those pelvic floor muscles to relax. So what we often see when women have had painful experiences with smear tests, they can go into this very reactive, protective spasm. We've all done it when we've hurt our neck and you end up with muscles in your shoulder and, everything feels sore. So what we try and do is relax those pelvic floor muscles. So if we were talking about a smear test in particular, actually working up to going for a smear test, actually going through grades of dilators at home on your own. So you start with the smallest dilator that's comfortable, and it's about the size of my little finger. So really small would be a size 1. Lots of lubrication in an environment where you can relax, and you can do some deep breathing exercises, take your time. You insert the size 1, you can move it around, make sure that's comfortable. Then when that's comfortable, that's not causing any pain, you can slowly grade up through the sizes. And that's going to maintain that stretch on that tissue. But most importantly, it's also going to stop that pelvic floor having that reactive sort of protective spasm. So what you can do in preparation to going for a smear is slowly work up those sizes of dilators. So you're working with a dilator that's about the size of one of the smallest speculums. And those small speculums, like Tonye said, are actually very, they are much smaller than the traditional ones you might have seen in the past. And so then you can go into your appointment feeling much more relaxed because you know your body's prepared. And it's fine to go in, take your headphones if you listen to music while you're working with dilators, and you can close your eyes and do your deep breathing. It's absolutely fine to just say, I'm just going to do that in the appointment. You can ask for a double appointment. You can prepare yourself. You don't have to talk about what you're cooking for dinner and have an awkward sort of conversation. The doctors and the nurses are really happy if you've got a little routine you want to do to know that you're going to be able to relax and your pelvic floor is going to relax. That's absolutely fine. So I think it's building in some preparation before, making sure you've done a course of vaginal estrogen, you've got the lubricant you like. All of those things are absolutely fine. And I don't think we're very good at sort of advocating for ourselves, saying this is going to be uncomfortable, so I need to do this. I genuinely believe the doctors and the nurses will be thrilled that you're coming and, you know, with a bit of a plan. They will be very supportive of it if you've got the right ones, in my experience.
Thanks, Eleanor. Now I've got the image is still up there, and there's obviously quite a range of sizes.
Yes.
So how does it work practically? Is this something that you do daily, and then when you feel ready and comfortable, move to the next size? And
so we actually sell these dilators in singles and in sets of 4 or the set of 8, but very few people need to go up to the big one. You might need to just work with the smaller ones. Actually, what I find is often women will start with size 1 or 2, just the single dilators. Once you've taught those muscles to relax, once you've stopped that fear response, the body will do the rest. The vagina is actually an organ that will stretch to deliver a baby. So as long as we've got the muscles reacting in the right way and not with this fear response, then the body will do the rest. So I often recommend just starting with a small set, and you might grade up. So to have the confidence to know you've got to the size of your partner or the size of a speculum, depending on what your personal goals are there. But another thing I recommend is starting with a size 1 or a size 2. And we have some really lovely vibrators. So this is an external vibrator, really smooth. It's not like anything scary you see in a big adult toy store. And you can do a lot of external vibration and massage work that really helps with increasing blood flow to the area, which will help with that muscle relaxation. It really helps with pleasure. And so a vibrator and a size 1 or 2 dilator working together to just try and increase blood flow, increase relaxation is really, really helpful. So there are lots of different ways to approach it. I can see a couple of questions coming in. So the dilators, in terms of how long you use them for, you don't have to use them every single day, but a couple of times a week. You can use them in the bath, wherever you're going to be most comfortable and not going to be interrupted, and you feel like you can give yourself a little bit of time. Once you never want to be pushing against pain. So these are about allowing the body to relax. This is just about gentle insertion, and then you can leave it in, you can move it around for 5 minutes and just make sure the body's completely relaxed, it's comfortable, and then you'd feel, okay, next time I can move up to the next size, or I can try the next size 2 now. So it's really about this combination of what we want to prevent, this sort of contraction and atrophy of the tissues as they become drier and thinner as you get older, but also this making sure that as that happens and then there's a bit of pain and changes, that the muscles don't think, what I'll do is I'll spasm to protect the whole area, which of course makes it worse. So I hope that answered that question.
Yeah, no, lots of great practical advice. And again, thank you for the link. And I've just posted as well that you very kindly are offering 10% off to our community. So details in there if anybody is interested in trying stuff out. And we have no commercial relationship with Eleanor. We only recommend her because we think she's really good at what she does, and she has very high quality products, sensibly priced, unlike some of the other stuff we see on the market, which I won't go into. So I think hopefully what you'll have seen, we've covered the gynecological symptoms that can happen during the menopause transition, that can make sex painful, that can cause vaginal irritation, dryness, and that can cause so many other issues other than painful sex, bladder issues, and so on. But now we're going to turn our attention to loss of sex drive, so loss of libido and what causes it. So Tonye, we touched on this previously, we know it's a very common issue, probably underreported, but just talk us through why this is such a common symptom of the menopause transition, and also you've touched on why it's so important to talk about, but physically why sex is good for us, as well as why it's good for our relationships.
Okay. So libido, most women libido will fall as we get older. And what we mean by libido is sexual desire, wanting to have sex. Now, sometimes we can have sex without wanting to have sex. I mean, we can enjoy sex, so we can become aroused. So you can have the sexual desire and it can come before, it can come after. We can get aroused, we can enjoy sex. But like somebody put in the chat, sometimes you're so tired, you'd rather sit or go to bed, with your hot chocolate or something, rather than engage with sex. But it's just being aware that that spontaneous desire falls and responsive desire remains as we get older. So these are one of the things that we try to untangle. Now, part of it is because of a fall in testosterone hormones that our ovaries produce as well, which starts to fall even from our 30s even. But it's also to do with everything else that might be going on with the menopause as well. It may be due to body image issues. It could be due to relationship difficulties. It could be due to painful sex. So that's why it's important we talk about all these things, because if sex is uncomfortable or painful, then you're not going to want to have sex, even if we replace your testosterone. So there's lots of reasons why things change as we go into the perimenopause and menopause, but certainly one of the reasons could be because of a change in our hormones as well. And I can't remember the other parts to the question.
Yeah, no, basically, why sex is good for our health physically, the benefits of having sex.
I mean, when we talk, the strict definition of health is well-being, it's holistic, and we know that when we enjoy sex and we have sex, our blood flow is increased and heart rate goes up, and everything points towards feeling well after one has had sex and one has had enjoyable, pleasurable sex. And that's why it's important. Obviously, it's important for intimacy in relationships. It makes couples, sometimes they don't have to have sex to feel close, but it can help as well. So these are all the reasons, perhaps. And I think what happens is, if people want to have sex, and then they should be able to have sex that's pleasurable and enjoyable. Now, some people, it's not a problem. They don't, it doesn't matter as much. And so it's that understanding, because I find some people come and actually it's not a problem to them, or it's not a problem in their relationship. But we know that sex is important to our well-being, to our health, to how we feel if we have good, pleasurable, enjoyable sex.
Yeah, and we've got some really interesting questions in here, which we will come back to. But I know in previous conversations that we've had around this topic, that I've had with you both and with the sex and relationship therapist as well, one of the really important things we called out is the difference between desire and arousal. And so that point that you made, Tonye, is really important. Because again, many women say to us, it's not an issue for me, but it's an issue for my partner or my husband, frankly. And we also hear, when we do sessions with men calling this out as an issue, that they don't feel loved or wanted in the same way when there's when the sexual side, the intimate side of the relationship changes. So none of us here are sex and relationship counselors, but I wondered if you both might want to just share your learnings and observations around when you speak to patients, Tonye or Eleanor, in your community, how sex and relationship therapy can benefit women and men as well, and same-sex relationships too.
Yeah, I mean, we've worked with some incredible sex and relationship therapists, and I know, Trudy has done that. There'll be some work she's done for my Menopause Centre that you can tap into. I remember her saying on one of our events this lovely sort of phrase of, when you're younger, you're like a microwave and you can just turn on immediately, and then you get a bit older and you're a bit like an oven and it just takes a little bit longer to get going. And then as we enter the later stage, you know, post-menopause, you're more like an Arga, and it can take a really long time to get to the point of wanting to have sex. But once you're up and going, it can be really enjoyable. So I think this idea that we're aroused, you know, the whole time, it's just changed. And I saw someone mention in the chat that it's probably hormone related, you know, evolutionary. We're not reproducing anymore. And I think there's some real truth in that. So I think we have to reframe what we want from our intimate relationships as we get older. I think it unfortunately does, and I certainly know as British, we're maybe not as good at this, but I think communication is key. I think introducing things like lubricants, trying a vibrator, you know, a simple vibrator like the one I showed you earlier, is a really good step forward. Communicating to your partner that things are a little bit uncomfortable now. There are products like O-Nut, which are really good if deep penetration is causing pain. And introducing those things, and that requires a conversation to say, I do still want to move to a place where I can enjoy sex again, but these have changed for me. I don't feel it until I'm up and going. So it is a little bit about, we're going to have to talk about it and possibly schedule some time when you can start reintroducing touching and exploration, and maybe without the expectation of penetrative sex, which will take the pressure off it, especially if it's become uncomfortable. But I think that communication is really, really key. Thinking about what time of day might suit you. If you do like your hot chocolate in bed, and I know, you know, that's me done at the end of the day, actually changing the expectations. So, but maybe morning sex, or, you know, there are different ways, thinking about trying to have special, you know, setting up a nice meal, all those romantic things that do actually matter, to feel connected to somebody again. The other thing that I, you know, we always recommend, and it was an advice Trudy gave our community years ago, but trying erotic fiction. So finding a book, reading an erotic novel. There's loads now out that you can get on your Kindle, and that can often just tap into a part of your brain that might have just gone to sleep. And, you know, so reading a book, erotic fiction is sometimes really helpful to start thinking, getting you thinking. So it is about reframing. It can be a really good time. This is a time to reset and think, what do I actually want from my intimate relationships moving forward? But yeah, it takes some courage to have those conversations, I think.
Oh, well put, Eleanor, very well put. And I've posted a link to a brilliant blog that Trudy wrote for us about keeping sex alive in the menopause and in relationships. And it's brilliant practical advice. And I love that analogy that Trudy has. And for those of you that can remember solid fuel, I guess, sometimes it is a bit like a solid fuel. It can take even longer, but it's worth it in the end. Tonye, anything to say on top of that around sex and relationship therapy?
I think sex and relationship therapy can be very helpful. I think it provides that safe space to talk about possibly some of the psychological reasons that sex is difficult and sex is uncomfortable. And we, as Eleanor has said, our sexual palate changes as we get older. So perhaps it's a time where you want to explore new, different things as well to revive interest. Maybe the novelty's gone out of the relationship, and it's a long-standing 30-year relationship, and things might be a little bit stale. So I think there is benefit to sometimes having that psychoeducation, perhaps with a sex and relationship expert who can. Sometimes you can get couple therapy, sometimes you can have therapy on your own. But it's all these things. So sex is affected by our hormones, it's affected by how we think, how we feel, what our expectations are. It's, you know, it's affected by the relationship as well. And they're all equally as important sometimes. And so there is a place for it and a benefit to it as well, if people do need it. Absolutely.
Brilliant, thank you. It's a really important point to cover. Now, we're unbelievably into the last 9 minutes or so. The hour has flown by, but we need to cover testosterone because so many women come to our clinic, Tonye, don't they? And generally asking about testosterone and inquiring as to whether or not it can help with libido. So what's your advice and what's your view on testosterone?
Like we've mentioned in the last 40 minutes or 45 minutes or so, sex can be affected by all sorts of different things, including testosterone. So when they come to clinic, of course, we ask about painful sex, about vaginal dryness, about relationship issues. We ask about what sex was like even before, because sometimes it's why now? Why have patients, why have women come to see us now? What's triggered them to come along with to request testosterone? Is it because of something they've heard on the news, in the media? So it's all those questions. It's about finding out what the whole picture is, but testosterone can be useful. And in the UK, we don't have preparations that are licensed for women. So, I mean, apart from one of the preparations from Australia. So it comes as a gel that can be applied, and we do blood tests before one starts testosterone, and we monitor the levels as women go along. But for some people, if they're not getting side effects, if it's not going to work after 3 to 6 months, we ask them to stop anyhow. Otherwise, testosterone can be a game changer for some women. But for some people, I always say to people, it's important to optimize your vaginal health in the first instance. Pelvic floor exercises can help you have better sex. The brain is the biggest sex organ in the body, so that communication is key. It's important. And then testosterone might just be the icing on the cake, really, but it can be helpful for some people.
Yeah, look, brilliant to frame it in that context. And I've just put a link into the chat as well about prescribing testosterone off license. So it explains what Tonye has called out, that it is available. It just explains what it means. But it's prompted a great question here. Thank you. One which we often get as well. I'm sure many people are wondering, can testosterone help with brain fog and tiredness with exhaustion as well?
Anecdotally, people have said that they feel more alert, they feel more focused, they have better concentration with testosterone, but we don't have the evidence in the literature. What we know is that testosterone can help with low libido, low sexual desire in women who are, we often recommend that they have HRT first, so they're well estrogenized. Testosterone can be helpful, but some people have other benefits to using testosterone apart from just helping with the libido. And in some women, even if the libido doesn't change, because as we know, libido is affected by lots of things, sometimes they feel better with the testosterone.
Yeah, very, very good. Yeah, really good and helpful to understand that. And what it comes down to, every woman's experience is different, isn't it? And how women react differently to different treatments as well. So have the conversation with your doctor to find out, you know, what's right for you and what will work best. Now, Tonye, if we ask this as a general question, because we've had somebody on the in the conversation this evening who's wondering about taking Eleanor, it was around some of the lubrications that we mentioned, but I'll extrapolate the question more generally. Vaginal estrogens, if you've had cancer, now I know it would depend on the type of cancer, but what's the general advice? Obviously, you need to go speak to your doctor specifically, but what's the general advice?
So vaginal estrogen in some people who've had cancer, even breast cancer, we can give. We do liaise with the oncologist or the breast surgeon and have a discussion as to what kind of treatment the person is on before giving them vaginal estrogen. But the evidence tends to show that there isn't any increase in recurrence if we do use vaginal estrogen. The moisturizers don't contain estrogen as far as I'm aware. And as Eleanor said, there are better ones. And so it is about finding the ones, because some people, for some people, just the moisturizers are are useful. If they don't want to use vaginal estrogen, they're beneficial, they're effective, they help.
I think we have the Yes vaginal moisturizer definitely doesn't have any estrogen or any estrogen mimics in. Trying vaginal probiotics is really helpful if you're experiencing those side effects of your cancer treatment. We do a lot of work with the charity Menopause and Cancer. It's Danny Binnington's charity. If you haven't come across it, it's a really great charity to. They've got some really good resources and a really good support network. So that's a really good charity to reach out to and to use some of those resources. But yeah, it's a really important thing to think about because it's often about how you feel, and it's so often about how you feel about taking different products or using different things, isn't it? So you know what is allowed and then what feels good and right for you is often very individual. So it's nice to know there are some more options slowly creeping through. We desperately need it across women's health, and I feel like there's a sea change, so it's coming, ladies.
About time. No, that's fantastic. Now we're into our last couple of minutes, so we'll take if you have any other questions, if you pop them in quickly, we'll take as many as we can. Otherwise, our last question for the evening would be again a really good question, but I'll put this to Tonye. Is there any vaginal estrogen that you would recommend?
And it's almost horses for courses, really. There's creams, which you can apply onto the external lippy bits. There's pastries, perhaps they're a little bit less messy. There's gels. Some of that is, they're quite watery, and that can be useful sometimes. We do have fatty pellets, which can provide. So there's options available, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. And it's what you feel would suit you and fit into your lifestyle as well.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think that's the thing sometimes, isn't it? It's a bit of trial and error to figure out what works for you. Eleanor, last question then. Can a vibrator desensitize the clitoris?
Yeah, I have been asked that before. There is no evidence that is the case. We know that often with atrophy there can be changes in sensitivity, some to the clitoris. And so actually that change is happening naturally. My experience and the experience of our community is no. I don't know, Tonye, if there's any evidence to say not something.
I mean, obviously, if anything's used excessively, but it just normally using a vibrator I wouldn't.
No.
Yeah.
But there are, we do experiences changes in sensitivity. So I think you have to reset, what was pleasurable, or maybe, if you were managing to achieve orgasms and it happened quite easily for you, that can change. So there are shifts, I think, through this period in our lives, and we have, there is a reset, and it can be better on the other side, but we sometimes have to get there.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, look, that brings the hour to a close. Before I hand back to Aideen, there was a great question in there about body odor and menopause. We have an article on our website about body odor and what causes it, why it can change during the menopause transition, and how to manage it. And I've put a link to our symptom checker where we look at over 40 different symptoms. This is all free evidence-based advice that's out there. So I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you for joining us this evening. We hope you found this conversation helpful, but particularly thanks to Dr. Wokoma, to Dr. Tonye, and to Eleanor, because they've both had very busy days at work, and they've joined us this evening to give their time to help you and to support you. So thank you very much. And Aideen, back to you.
Thanks so much, Helen. And yes, totally second that. It was a great event. Thanks so much to Dr. Tonye and to Eleanor for this evening and for all the amazing help and advice. And of course, thanks so much to everyone who's joined us. Thanks for all your wonderful questions and sharing of your experiences too. So you will all receive a link to the recording after the event if you'd like to rewatch it or share it with friends. But for now, that's it from us, and good night, and thank you all for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.